an 11-year-old wreaks havoc, a game that is not worth playing, and putting a blind guy behind the wheel. Hi, I'm Ken Ray, and this is Checklist 212, brought to you by SecureMac. If those headlines gave you a feeling of deja vu, you may have experienced them before. And if this intro gives you a sense of deja vu, this is not our first holiday together. A couple of years ago, Nicholas Raba, Nicholas Tocek, August Trometer, and I got together to talk about our favorite hacker movies, what they got right, what they got wrong, and what we could learn from them about staying safe. The presents are wrapped, the stockings are hung. Nothing left to do now but grab a tasty warm beverage, snuggle up by the fire, and enjoy the Hacky Holidays Special, brought to you by SecureMac. In the 1995 movie Hackers, a young boy is arrested by the U.S. Secret Service for writing a computer virus and is banned from using a computer until his 18th birthday. Years later, he and his newfound friends discover a plot to unleash a dangerous computer virus, but they must use their computer skills to find the evidence while being pursued by the Secret Service and the evil computer genius behind the virus. Hackers is directed by Ian Softley. It stars Angelina Jolie and Johnny Lee Miller. It features Matthew Lillard, Fisher Stevens, Lorraine Bracco, Wendell Pierce, and Mark Antony. It gets a rotten score of 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. It gets an audience score of 68, and it is Nicholas Tocek's Hacky Holiday pick. Tell me why.
Well, this isn't just like my Hacky Holiday pick. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Sadly enough. Okay, maybe Star Wars is higher, but still, Hackers is one of my favorites. It's something I kind of grew up on. I was just getting into computer stuff around that time, so it was definitely an influence that kind of brought me into the whole computer security thing in the end. So I think it's like hard to describe what Hackers is. It's really cheesy and it's really bad, and it's bad in a good. It's so bad it's good. It's something you love to hate, or hate to love, or something like that. It's a classic, and most computer security folks and hackers and everybody else love the movie just because it is. It's so goofy. It's fun. It's a good escape.
You raise an interesting point, and I'm curious about this for all three of you. Did movies play a part in each of you getting into technology or computers or what have you? Because I got into podcast by doing radio, and I got into radio by listening to the radio and liking that. There was nothing that happened on the screen. There was, with the exception of WKRP, there was nothing that happened on TV that made me think that would be cool, because, boy, those people were not cool. I mean, did Hollywood's portrayal of tech get you guys into tech?
It kind of dovetailed with my own experience. It just happened to be at the right time. When Hackers came out and some of those other movies came out in the 90s, I was already starting to get into computers. My father owned a print shop, so they had a lot of Macs there to do the graphic design stuff. And so I was into computers really early. I was into computers before those movies came out, but it kind of came at the right time for me to cement that feeling of, wow, this computer security stuff is really cool. And we had a number of movies that came out in the 90s like that. So I think it was just the correct timing.
I think it kind of fueled it as well, like conversation pieces, just some of the technology and graphic aspects of it for the time. I mean, cheesy as it may have been, especially now looking back at it going, oh man, that's cool. Or that's cool with quotes now. But it definitely did fuel kind of growing up in that time, just as a conversation piece, talking with friends, different characters in the movies that were portrayed.
Did you dream of having a cool handle like Cowboy or something like that? That was the one from Mona Lisa Overdrive, I think. No, Neuromancer. Or I can't remember, what was the one in Hackers? It was like, Overlord Drive something. He changed his name 3 times, I think.
There were a lot of cool names in that movie, and I think everybody here may have had a little nickname that they used back in the day. Chances are nobody's going to talk about them.
Interesting. We need to get back to hackers, but really quickly, August, was it like, did the stuff you saw on the screen make you think, yeah, computers are for me, or was it more like, you're up at 3 a.m. eating Doritos and some guy came on the screen and said, have you thought about an exciting career in computers?
I think it was just a love of science fiction for me, and I'm not quite sure what drove it, whether it be books or movies. Probably, a nice soup of both that drove me to, investigating computers and making technology a part of my life.
Well, now I want soup. So let's see. Mr. Tachek, what does hackers get right?
Not so much the hacking stuff, actually. Okay. They get the freaking stuff, the phone hacking. They get a lot of that really spot on. I went ahead and rewatched most of the movie, at least the security, computer security, phone security scenes, to refresh my memory on it. And that is really spot on. They actually did have a consultant, I believe, with the movie, Emmanuel Goldstein, who runs 2600 magazine. It's one of the hacker quarterly magazines that's been out for years and years and years. So they had some consultants on the movie, and the phone freaking stuff. I mean, there's no real way to kind of gussy that up and make it look pretty. It is what it is. So they had things like connecting to the telephone network interface box outside the house. It was one of the opening scenes. He's got the phone line going out his window of his apartment, and he's plugged into it, and he's got those cables going from there to his modem, and that's how he got online. So he was using somebody else's telephone line to connect to the internet. And it's just there were other scenes later on in the movie. One of the characters is in jail, and he needs to get a hold of his friends, right? So instead of making his call to his lawyer, which would have been the smart thing, he taps the receiver hook 10 times in a row. And that actually, in the way phones used to work with signaling, that would actually be the equivalent of dialing 0. If you tapped it once, it would be 1. If you tapped it twice, it would be 2. So you could actually make a phone call by tapping on your receiver, basically hanging up your phone real quick, but just using your finger on the little receiver buttons for old style phones that most of us don't even have anymore. And so that was actually really realistic. So he used that to get the operator, and then had the operator call his friends and give them a heads up. And that was something that's real. You could do that. If you still had that kind of phone system, you could still do that. So that kind of stuff they actually did really accurately, which was pretty cool. And that was one of the things I think at the time for me with watching the movie was finding out that some of that stuff really was real, and that it could be done. That was very much that's really cool. I want to learn more about this. And that was probably part of what cemented that movie in terms of my feelings for it, my fond memories of it.
And then one of the questions I had down here for all three of you for each of your movies is, what does it get wrong? But it occurs to me as I'm asking that could be the silliest thing I ever said. What's the most ridiculous thing might be a better thing. Because I would imagine any movie like this, to make it accessible, they're going to do things. It's like, well, that doesn't work. It's like when you're watching a movie set in San Francisco and they turn off, one street with a big hill to a completely different part of town. If you've ever lived there, you're like, well, that would take an hour and a half to get from that part of the city to that part of the city. And yet they just turned a corner and there they are. What's the most ridiculous thing that happens in this movie?
I'd say it actually has to be a tie for this one. Number one would be the graphical user interface representations of hacking. They do all these 3D flybys of computer systems, and it's all futuristic, and none of it is real, and it's really cool.
Hold on, that's not how you find the garbage file?
No, you don't hack the planet that way.
It stinks, because that's what movies kept telling us it was going to look like. Cyberspace seemed like it would be the coolest place in the world, because it seemed like it might be a place, because you might be able to spin by a numeric representation of a building, and now it's like, oh, have you tried logging in?
Well, so now there was that actually has an interesting point. One of the things they did, I guess I could say they got right, kind of in a futuristic sense, is they had a few representations of technology that is actually real now. this many years later. They had a setup where the bad guy at one point was kind of in this little VR simulation thing. He had a headset on. None of the headsets were that small back then, but it looked like an Oculus Rift does now. I mean, it looked very much like technology we have today. And I think there was another scene later in the movie where the main character, Dade, is hacking with the pirate eye. It almost looks like a really primitive prototype of Google Glass. And it was really kind of cool to see, like, oh, hey, well, did this happen to have any influence on later generations of people who then made this technology? It was just an interesting thought I came up with when I was rewatching it. But as far as other stuff they got wrong, egregious errors, at the end of the movie, they're launching viruses, and they're these graphical representations of viruses like eating files, and it's literally Cookie Monster going after cookies on the screen, or a rabbit. It's really ridiculous, and it's not how it works at all, and it's silly, but it was engaging. And it's going to be better to show it that way than to be a bunch of boring command line text that nobody's going to get anyway.
I was going to say it'd be so much cuter if, you looked at your computer and Mark Zuckerberg was dressed as the Hamburglar and taking all your information.
Don't you think we're going to see that with some of the ransomware, though? Like cool animations and things like that going on?
Well, here's something interesting. So they had these silly names for these different types of viruses. They had the rabbit and the Cookie Monster, all this other stuff. And now, in recent years, computer security folks have found that giving unique names to these vulnerabilities, like Heartbleed, have resulted in the news actually picking up the story and paying attention, and it's getting a lot more coverage than it would if it was something boring. And so that's kind of something I think that's important, is that the computer security industry is realizing, hey, if we make this sound exciting, it's exciting to more people than just us.
Marketing 101.
Yep.
You just gave me an idea for a game. What did you say? You said the rabbit, the Cookie Monster, the Running Man, the Cabbage Patch. Separate out the old dances from the fictional viruses.
Wow.
So because we like to, bring things to people that people can actually use on the checklist, from a security side, use in addition to, hey, this would be a really fun movie to watch, or a really bad fun movie to watch, or whatever. From a security side, is there anything that people can actually learn from hackers?
I guess some of that phone stuff, as I said, although it's not really commonplace anymore, at least in the United States.
If you end up back in time and can't make a phone call, then that's a great way to do it.
I think a better lesson to take away from hackers is that you can kind of understand the hacker and computer security culture as a whole now in the present day. If you're using something like hackers as a frame of reference, you'll get a lot of, there's still a lot of in-jokes. We love hackers. We love to make fun of it now. And so there's still a lot of references to it in a lot of places online. So it's one of those movies where you can watch it and it's good fun, and it doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense from a security standpoint, but you can kind of get the mindset of where a lot of these computer security folks are coming from these days, and where a lot of these hackers are coming from, especially if they grew up with something like this.
And I just had a flashback to the dumpster diving scene.
Yeah.
Make sure you shred all your documents.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Shred all your documents, because that's one thing I didn't think about. That is real. Back to the real things they had was they did do dumpster diving to find passwords and logins, and they had shoulder surfing and phishing, and there were some things they did get right. It was just like the hacking, for being called hackers, the hacking is what they got wrong. The rest of it's what they got right.
In the 1983 movie WarGames, a young computer whiz... kids again, am I right? Anyway, a young computer whiz...
all over the place.
I know.
They're geniuses.
Well, they're trouble. They're trouble. If you see a movie with kids, if it's not Newsies... A young computer whiz kid hacks into a government supercomputer and starts a game called Global Thermonuclear War. But the game is real. It's then a race against time to convince the computer that the only way to win is not to play. WarGames is directed by John Badham. It stars Matthew Broderick, Ali Sheedy, Dabney Coleman, John Wood, and Barry Corbin. Folks to look for include The West Wing's John Spencer, Reservoir Dogs' Michael Madsen, and Grease's Eddie Deason. He's really hard to miss in this movie. It gets a fresh score of 93%. Mr. Potato Head. Mr. Potato Head. It gets a fresh score of 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. It gets an audience score of 76%. What is wrong with audiences? And it is Augustrometer's Hacky Holidays pick. Why WarGames, August?
Oh, wow. I think the reason I like this movie so much, in addition to being just a great thriller, it was very accessible to kids at the time, at least high school students. It really is just a great story. But on top of that, it really introduced so many things to the worldwide audience that had been going on for a long time, sort of in the background and underground, all the hacking stuff, but no one really knew about it. And this movie really brought it to the fore and said, look, stuff is going on, and this is the threat that we have against us.
What does it get right as far as you're concerned?
Oh boy, so much. Everything from the online hacking to the physical hacking to even social engineering is really spot on in this movie. I was really impressed that it sort of covered all of those bases and kind of showed people what was going on in the world of computers.
Remind me, because I was thinking back on this one, because I'll be honest, I've seen Sneakers, but it's been a long time. I've never seen Hackers. WarGames is one that I remember seeing in the theater, and I would watch it. When it came on TV, I would watch it over and over again. It was a movie that hit just at the right time for me. One of the things I always remember is Matthew Broderick basically set up a modem to call just numbers. He was just calling a string of numbers. And then, of course, when it would find a number that it knew, or find a number with which it could communicate, then it would sort of log that, and he could go back and log in later. I feel like the three of us have talked about, and maybe in my head, I think it was probably Nicholas Tachek who brought it up one time, but basically it's the kind of thing that happens today, except it's computers just sort of going out trolling for open connections. I mean, that's sort of a digital analog version of the kind of thing that you guys talk about still happening today.
Yeah, the original, the phone one was called war dialing back in the day.
Yeah, and it was they took the war came from the movie WarGames, and then then when people would cruise around with laptops looking for open wireless nodes, it became war driving. All inspired by this movie.
What's ridiculous in this film?
That that our national defense has just a login with no password. You just type in somebody's name and you log in.
Do you honestly think that's ridiculous, or do you just want to think that's ridiculous?
Well, even in the movie, the school had a login and password.
August, didn't you see the news though? Recently, that was it 28-year-old vulnerabilities in our national defense missile system.
Yes,
maybe it's not so out there.
That's so.
Yeah, all the missile codes are 1111.
Well, no, they saw what Kanye did, so they switched it to 0000 because they want to be cool. It's not just about being secure; it's also about looking great doing it.
And the other thing is that, and it's a conceit of the movie, but pretty much all of the adults in this movie are complete morons. The only smart ones are the kid and Professor Falcon. Everybody else is kind of an idiot in the movie. And I would like to think that, we've got some smarter people working for the government than that.
The guy hanging out with Eddie Deason, he strikes me as maybe one of the coolest characters in the whole thing. But again, it's been a long time since I've seen it. And it's, he's obnoxious, no question, but he's also just, I don't know.
And he gets 1 minute of screen time.
That's true. That's true. But he can control Eddie Deason, and that seems like it would be a very difficult thing to do. This was also the movie that always made me want a remote control pterodactyl.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
Now we know we could buy the movie Hackers for you for gift ideas and remote control dinosaurs.
Yes, well, no, not remote control dinosaurs, dude. A remote control pterodactyl. I mean, it was the flying part of it, I think, that really got to me. From a security side, what would you say? I mean, is there something that we can learn, that modern day viewers can learn from WarGames?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the social engineering that he did in order to break into these systems. You know, everything from when he changed his grade, he knew where the secretary wrote down the password to the computer, to, you know, just trying to figure out how to log in to this computer, the national computer. He did a ton of background research on Professor Falcon. He spent hours in the library trying to figure out how he could log in as Professor Falcon. So I think the social engineering part of what he did is really, really important takeaway for all of us, because that's the thing. That's generally the weakest point in the system is us.
You know, it just occurred to me, are we sure that Matthew Broderick's character from WarGames and Matthew Broderick's character from Ferris Bueller's Day Off weren't the same character?
They're damn close, I tell you.
Just one has more really fun, but then again, he's lived through the end of days, so he knows, like, there's no point in not having fun because this could all go away tomorrow.
So maybe they put him in witness relocation and stuck him in Chicago. And
but he kept doing the wrong thing 9 times. 9 times? 9 times. We'll get to Mr. Raba's Hacky Holiday pick in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. A lot of us are relying on our computers more today than we were just a year ago. Even in the before times, though, protecting your computer with good anti-malware tools was essential. You are doing that now, right? If not, may I acquaint you with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your machine. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. Then once you decide to buy for less. You can take a little off your subscription to MacScan 3 with offer code CHECKLIST. Try it first. Watch it kick those tracking cookies to the curb. Then when you're ready to buy for less with offer code CHECKLIST at securemac.com/MacScan.
Ho, ho, ho.
Wow, that was scary. Hey, do you guys want to ask me about my favorite hacker movie really quickly? Because I know I'm not a security guy. I'm not a computer guy. I work with computers, but I am not of them. Do you want to ask me my favorite?
Yeah. What's your favorite hacker movie?
Superman 3. Do you know what I loved about Superman 3?
Why is it? And why is it your favorite? What does it?
Well, I mean, there were two things. What does it get right? Well, I mean, it gets two things right. One of them teaches you how to be a bad guy, which you shouldn't do, and the other one, shows you how to be a bad guy, which you also shouldn't do. I was amazed by the idea that he just found extra money in the computer system. Because if you don't remember Superman 3, what a lucky person you are. But it did have Richard Pryor in it, and he was like data entry or something, I think. And he realized that like fractions of a cent were sort of getting thrown around in the computer system because they were only working in whole cents, not partial. And he realized that, well, all of those would pile up into real money, and so he found a way to funnel that off. But the thing that I really learned was if you do something bad, don't be stupid about it. Because then, the bad guys in the movie figure out that he's stealing the money, and they're like, well, we're never going to catch this guy because he's found a way to hide the money. I mean, he would have to be a complete idiot. And then, of course, Richard Pryor shows up in the parking lot in a Ferrari or some kind of like amazing. And it's like what Jimmy the Gent Conway tried to tell Frankie Carbone and Frenchie and all those people after they pulled off the Lufthansa heist. Sit on the money. Don't do anything stupid. And then, of course, they all went out and bought cars and fur coats, and they ended up dead. So, Goodfellas is my favorite hacker movie, apparently, but we're moving on to actual hacker movies. In the 1992 movie Sneakers, Martin Bishop is the head of a group of experts who specialize in testing security systems. When he's blackmailed by government agents into stealing a top-secret black box, the team finds themselves embroiled in a game of danger and intrigue. After they recover the box, they discover that it has the capacity to decode all existing encryption systems around the world, and that the agents who hired them didn't work for the government after all. It's directed by Phil Alden Robinson. It has a cast that could not be ignored: Robert Redford, Sidney Poitier, David Strathairn, Dan Aykroyd, River Phoenix, Ben Kingsley. Folks to look for include The West Wing's Timothy Busfield and Groundhog Day's Stephen Tobolowsky. It gets a fresh score of 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences like it more, giving it a score of 80, and it is Nicholas Raba's Hacky Holidays pick. Why sneakers?
Oh, this movie, I remember being a kid watching it with my dad at the time, and just kind of being amazed by the idea of the whole systems would allow you to have access to everything. And this magic black box that they were trying to go after and steal was that little system that gave you magical access to everything. Of course, starting off the movie, when they're transferring money to people's bank accounts as a kid, you're going, oh, that would be cool just to transfer all this money into my own bank account. And as a child, that kind of made me go like, ooh, that would be kind of fun. But this little black box, I mean, you think about it from back then, and you think about basically what it could do. They talked about it could give you access to the reserve. It could give you access to the airline network. It could give you access to all of these different systems, and anybody would love to get their hands on it. And
remind me, was the black box an actual box? Was it a physical thing? Because the way you're talking about it, it reminds me of the clean slate from The Dark Knight Rises, which wasn't a physical thing. It was just computer code or a program, I think. But the black box was an actual box.
Yeah, and in this movie, it was encased in what looked like an answering machine back then. And it had physical parts to it, and there was the data and that encryption key, the master key, as it were, that would give them access to all of these computer systems and decrypt everything. And one of my favorite lines from the movie is when Cosmos says the world isn't run by weapons anymore, or energy, or money. It's run by little ones and zeros, little bits of data. It's all just electrons.
That's kind of... did you guys see Network? Because that was one of the arguments in that.
I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore.
Well, that movie, yeah, but the part where the Ned Beatty character brings Howard Beale into his office and says, that he's messing with the forces of nature, and he says there are no borders, there are no countries, there's only IBM, AT&T, and quotes it's a list of companies that aren't nearly as important now as they were back in the day. Although, come to think of it, IBM and AT&T are still pretty big. But yeah, I mean, it basically made sort of the same kind of argument that weapons are nice and borders are fun, but really it's about money. Well, though this guy says it's not about money. Anyway, part of me wonders if it's not a little bit silly to have the whole thing hinge on a physical thing. But then I'm remembering, like, what was it? Was it Omnivore? Was that the name of the thing where the FBI or some branch of the government would show up at an ISP and plug something into a computer that was also a black box, and you didn't know exactly what it was doing, but it was doing something? Carnivore. Okay, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, would you say well, let me ask you, what does this get wrong?
Well, probably at that time, a device that small being able to do all that stuff. Now, in today's technology age, computers got a lot smaller. I mean, the ideas behind the movie, it didn't get a lot wrong. Do you guys think it got stuff?
Wasn't it mainly based along essentially breaking cryptography? Wasn't that what the black box did?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, that's not... It's like now that we've gone further with encryption standards and everything else, and algorithms, it would be harder to pull off. But if everything was secured with, like, say we had today's knowledge of the security holes and the encryption technology from back then when the movie came out, yeah, you could have made a black box that would hack all those networks, crack the cryptography. Yeah, you could do that now if we're talking about that old style encryption. So technically, if you found the flaws in the algorithms, you could do something very similar.
What was the coolest thing they pulled off in the movie? Was it, because you said in the beginning, it's like, oh, I was a kid and I was watching all this money and I thought, hey, cool money. But, going back, like, what's one of the things, is there anything that you watch and you're like, wow, that's still pretty neat?
Oh, there was definitely a lot of cool things in it. When they had the video cameras and they're trying to do, basically shoulder surfing, looking at the person over their keyboard, although the other person got in the way, so they weren't able to see the full password right there. So you have the shoulder surfing going on there. Social engineering, there's definitely a lot of that from just being friendly with somebody, to get access to their personal hardware. In this case, the character went over to the house to get access to the key card in the person's wallet. So it was having a date with them just so they could get that type of information by being close to them. What was the passphrase that they said in the movie that they needed for the... My
voice is my passport. Was it passport or password? Verify me, something like that?
Passport, I think verify passport, me. So they're recording all the audio bits and then piecing it together for the voice recognition scene. So you swipe the card and then it has its second bit of authentication, and they play back the audio bit that they recorded during this date with the person. So they had the key card, they had the person saying passport, and all these other words that they combined all together. There's just a lot of fun, cool things in the movie.
That was 1990. That was 1992, and they were doing two-factor authentication. That's kind of cool.
That sounds... Yes, although that was the kind of thing that you saw. I mean, it's also like when...
Yeah, that was when they'd show that kind of stuff in the movies. But the fact that it took how many decades and it's still not even in full use now.
I wonder if part of the problem is that people went way over the top with it. Like Get Smart. I mean, if you think about it, the beginning of Get Smart was like, what, 8-factor authentication, right? Because you had to go in, you had to punch something in, yep. You had to use a key, you had to put his face on something, you had to walk in, you had to dial a number. And then, of course, he fell through the floor.
I got to say, Sneakers has one of my least favorite scenes in any movie, simply because it just bored me to tears. Here you have an action-adventure movie, so let's put a scene right in the middle of it where you have to move as slowly as possible.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I found myself... I rewatched the movie, and I found myself... put it on in the background type deal and go, okay, so he has to move less than however many inches per second as he has to get across the room and back.
Right. Well, I want to ask you the question I've been asking everybody, but I feel like the answers have actually been pretty much the same for all three, which is an interesting thing to think about with technology. What I wanted to ask is there anything that viewers can learn from Sneakers? But I mean, you've talked about social engineering. I mean, what's interesting is I think we're answering that question in kind of a weird way, because I guess these movies do teach people how to social engineer. But I mean, obviously, as a cautionary tale, you can kind of watch it and say, oh, well, that's a thing I should look out for, I guess.
Yeah, and teach you all those lessons of what exactly not to do.
Don't go on dates with strangers and say weird words while they're recording you.
Yes. Will you please speak into my microphone and say passport? Have wide shoulders. Close your blinds so people can't see through your window. If the government ever asks you to steal something for them, wonder if they're really the government.
Trust no one.
Oh, now you're just making everybody paranoid.
My job here is done.
I was going to say, I thought that was like that was our secret mission statement, I thought. I don't know. You'd heard earlier that Hackers was Nicholas Tachek's Hacky Holiday pick. If it's a favorite of yours as well, there is an article on the SecureMac site that you should check out. Renly Santiago. He played Phantom Freak in the movie Hackers. Yeah, Nick Leone got to interview Santiago recently for the SecureMac site. He looks back on the film 25 years later. You can read the article by going to SecureMac.com. You hit the button for news near the middle of the page. Then scroll down until you hit Hackers at 25 with Renly Santiago. You know, something fun to check out over the holidays. Hey, if you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is SecureMac.com/checklist. There you'll find notes for all the shows that we've done. You can actually listen to every show right there as well. There are links to some of the source material. Tons of stuff to check out at SecureMac.com/checklist. If you enjoy the checklist, could you let people know about it? And if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that'd be huge. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. Hacky holidays, everybody. Talk to you soon.